As we start getting into the concept of laying out items on our page, there is one thing that you've got to understand about HTML and CSS code, and that is something that we call the CSS Box Model. The CSS Box, B-O-X model. What this means is that everything you see is contained within a box. Everything. So here on the right side of this screen, you can see that I have an H1, an H2, H3, H4, H, all the way down to an H6 size. And then I have some other lines of text in here as well that are simply marked as paragraphs. Now, what I want you to see is that everything is contained within a box. So right here is, these are the paragraphs that I typed. If I come up here to the style section, working with embedded styles, I'm just going to type the letter P as the selector. Remember, the P here is the element, the HTML element, and I want to select this element, so the P up here becomes the selector, and I type a curly brace and I'm going to hit enter, so that my P is aligned with all the left here, and then the cursor comes down one row and indents all by itself here in brackets. Now what I want to do, I simply want to put a border around all of the paragraphs. Now I'm not going to force the border to be there. I'm just going to say if there is a paragraph, then let its border 1 pixel, and I have to tell it what kind of a line I want that border to be. I want it to be a solid line, and let's just make it black. All right. Now we hit Control S. And what you see here is the borders around the paragraphs. This is called the CSS Box Model. And so paragraphs are made up of something that contains it. The paragraph is contained within something, and that container, which in this case is a paragraph, that container has properties. It has a property called margin, and it has a property called border. So let's come up here to where we see border, and if we type margin, and let's make this so we can see it, we'll make it 20 pixels. 20 pixels wide for the margin for all of these paragraphs. Now when I hit Control S to save, then you'll see this adjust. So keep your eye, and I'm going to hit Control S here in 3, 2, 1. So we see that this paragraph, because see this is the paragraph selector, this paragraph is looking at all of these paragraphs down here, and it's applying a margin that goes around it. So the margin is outside of the border, isn't it? The margin comes first in the box model order, and then you have the margin itself, and the margin doesn't have to be 1 pixel wide. My gosh, we can make this thing 15 pixels wide, and we'll make it stand out like a picture frame. We'll call it ridge, and we'll call it blue. And Control S to save here in 3, 2, 1. We still have our margin, which is outside of the border. We've made the border 15 pixels wide. We've called it ridged. So if you look closely at this, you may have to do it on your computer, then you'll see that it sort of stands out like a picture frame. It's almost 3D. Now look at the contents inside of this. So the content is surrounded by the P tag, but we told the styles that for those P elements that we want the border to be 15 pixels, we want the margin to be 20. Now there is something inside that stands between the text and this margin, and that's called padding. So P-A-D-D-I-N-G, padding, and let's make this 10 pixels so that we can see it really well. So 10 pixels, and here we go to save it in 3, 2, 1. And so now there is 10 pixels of space between the margin and the actual content itself. So we have a paragraph selector, and we're telling this selector that the box that contains this can be pushed over with a margin. It can be outlined with color and width and depth and everything. And then on the inside, we can even have padding. And there's a lot more that we can do to this. And just to show you one more, up here we have the H1 element right here, the H1 element. All of these are contained in boxes too. So if I say H1 and then type my curly brace, then let's say border 1 pixel solid red. And here we'll save it in 3, 2, 1. All right, so here we have the H1 now, and it shows that it's a box. And notice the box goes all the way from the left margin all the way to the right. That's so important for you to remember this term. So we go all the way from the left to the right. We could do the same thing for all of these other elements. And right down here I have one more, and you see it right here in my code. This is an H1 element. But here, this H1 element, then I've decided to style it a little differently, so I created a class. And this is going to be a certain specific class of objects that I might put this class equals H1 small. And you can see that code right up here. What I did, I made a dot and then H1 small, put in my brackets, and I said font size of 0.67 EM and margin of colon 2.3.3 and so on. Here we go. So here we have this is actually an H1. It's an H1. So it gets a box too, but it's much smaller. Why? Well, because in your browsers, there are certain built-in default settings. And all of the browsers are fairly close to each other. There's slight tiny differences, but for the most part, the H1 style is always going to be big and look like this by default. The H2 will always be like this by default. The H6 will always be like this by default. And here I simply took another H1, but I wanted to change what we have here from the default. And so what I did was I just assigned a special class and said, okay, this may be an H1, but I want it to be a special class of H1, and I'm going to call it an H1 small. And so I don't have to accept these sizes. If I want the H1 element, if I need to use an H1 element, but I want it to be very small, then I can simply come in and just change the size of it up here in my CSS code. So what we're beginning to see is that we can lay things out on the page, and we can do this in a way by using our styles that can cause it to come in from the left, right, top, bottom. We can do all these different kinds of things. So this is what we mean by boxes. Every item of content. I could even put a photograph on here. Every single item of content is contained within a box. And the way that we cause things to have space between themselves, or space from a certain margin, or different colors or widths of borders, the way we do all of that is with these properties that we call the CSS Box Model. And that's very important for you to learn in this first lesson.